She was standing 5 feet away, holding the news that would change his life forever. But he didn't look at her. He looked at his wealthy friends, his investors, and the woman his mother wanted him to marry, and he laughed. He called her a nobody. He called their 2-year relationship a temporary distraction. Harrison Grant broke Maya's heart for the sake of his reputation, unaware that at that very moment she was carrying the only heir to the Grant dynasty. He thought he was securing his future, but he was actually destroying it. This is the story of a public betrayal, a secret child, and the devastating price of pride. Buckle up. The chandeliers inside the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel didn't just sparkle. They judged. Maya Linley adjusted the strap of her black dress, a vintage piece she'd found at a thrift store in Brooklyn, and tailored herself. It fit her slender frame perfectly, but standing amidst the sheer opulence of the Grant family charity gala, she felt like an imposter. She wasn't here as a guest, technically. She was here as a junior landscape architect for the firm renovating the Grant Estate's gardens. But she was also here because Harrison had asked her to come. "Just be near the bar at 9 p.m., Harrison had whispered to her that morning, kissing her forehead before leaving her small apartment in Astoria. "I'm going to tell them tonight, Maya. I'm done hiding us." Harrison Grant, 32, heir to a real estate empire that owned half the skyline of Manhattan, and the man Maya had been secretly seeing for 18 months. It was a romance built in the stolen moments between board meetings and site visits, a collision of two worlds that shouldn't have worked, but did. Or so she thought. Maya checked her phone. 9:05 p.m. She scanned the room. The air smelled of expensive lilies and old money. Near the center of the room, a circle of men in tuxedos held court. In the middle was Harrison, holding a tumbler of scotch, looking every bit the prince of the city. Standing next to him, with a possessive hand on his forearm, was Serena Thorpe. Serena was everything Maya wasn't. Born into oil money, sharp-tongued, and the woman Harrison's mother, Catherine Grant, had been pushing him toward since kindergarten. Maya took a breath and stepped forward. She just wanted to catch his eye, a smile, a signal. As she approached, the ambient noise of the party dipped, and Harrison's voice carried clearly over the jazz band. "Come on, Harry," one of his college friends, a loud banker named Toby, jeered. "I saw you with the gardener girl at the site last week. You looked pretty cozy. Don't tell me you're actually considering settling down with the help." Maya froze. She was 10 feet away, partially obscured by a pillar. She should have announced herself. She should have walked away. She couldn't move. Harrison took a sip of his drink. He looked tired. He looked at Serena, who was whispering something in his ear, probably reminding him of the merger her father was blocking until their engagement was announced. He looked at his mother, Catherine, watching him like a hawk from the adjacent table. The pressure in the room was a physical weight. Harrison laughed, but it was a hollow, nervous sound. "Toby, don't be ridiculous," Harrison said, his voice loud enough to reach the investors, loud enough to reach his mother, and loud enough to reach Maya. She's talented with the hedges, sure, but she's just a temporary distraction. A placeholder until the real business is settled." The men roared with laughter. Serena smirked, leaning her head on his shoulder. "See, I told you boys he has standards." "She's a nobody," Harrison added, the scotch talking, the fear of losing his inheritance talking. "A fling. Nothing that would ever end up in the family portrait." The words didn't just hurt, they eviscerated. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. A placeholder, a nobody. 18 months. The nights they spent talking about his fears of not living up to his father. The weekend in the Catskills, where he told her he loved her. The way he held her when her grandmother died. All of it reduced to a punchline to impress a group of men who didn't even like him. Maya's hand instinctively went to her stomach. She hadn't told him yet. She had found out only yesterday. The nausea, the missed cycle. She was 7 weeks pregnant. She had come tonight not just to be acknowledged, but to tell him he was going to be a father. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and stinging. She stepped back, her heel catching on the carpet. The movement caught Harrison's eye. He turned, the smile freezing on his face. Their eyes locked across the sea of tuxedos and gowns. For a second, time stopped. Harrison saw the devastation on her face. He saw the color drain from her cheeks. He realized she had heard every word. "Maya," he mouthed, taking a step forward, his face shifting from arrogance to panic. She shook her head, a small final movement. She didn't scream, she didn't throw a drink. She simply turned around and walked out of the ballroom. "Maya, wait," Harrison called out, his voice cracking. He shoved Toby aside, spilling his drink. "Maya!" "Harrison, sit down," his mother Catherine hissed, appearing at his elbow like a spectre. "Do not make a scene. The senator is watching." Harrison hesitated. He looked at the exit where the hem of Maya's black dress had just disappeared, and then he looked at his mother's icy glare. In that hesitation, he lost her. The rain outside the hotel was torrential, matching the chaos inside Maya's chest. She didn't have an umbrella. She didn't care. She hailed a cab, her hands trembling so hard she could barely open the door. "Where to, lady?" the driver asked. "LaGuardia," she whispered. Then, realizing she didn't have a ticket, she corrected herself. "Astoria. Just take me home." She packed her life into 2 suitcases that night. She blocked Harrison's number. She blocked the office number. She wrote a resignation email to the firm, effective immediately, citing a family emergency. Harrison came to her apartment the next morning. She watched from the window of the neighbor's apartment across the hall. She had given the neighbor, Mrs. Gable, $50 to let her hide there for an hour. She saw Harrison pounding on her door. He looked disheveled. He was still wearing the dress shirt from the night before, unbuttoned at the collar. "Maya, please, just open the door. I was drunk. I was scared. It didn't mean anything." It meant everything, she thought, her hand resting protectively over her belly. You chose them. You will always choose them. If she told him about the baby now, what would happen? His mother, Catherine, would descend. They would call her a gold digger. They would try to buy her off, or worse, take the child and raise it in that cold, loveless mausoleum of a mansion. She wouldn't let her child be a placeholder. She wouldn't let her child be denied. When Harrison finally left, shoulders slumped, Maya went back to her apartment, grabbed her bags, and left her key on the counter. She took a bus to Chicago. She had a cousin there who needed help running a small landscaping business. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't New York, but it was safe. 7 months later, the birth was difficult. Maya was alone in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and loneliness. Her cousin Sarah was in the waiting room with her own kids, unable to come in. When the doctor handed the baby to her, the world narrowed down to a single point. He had Harrison's eyes, a startling, piercing blue that seemed too old for a newborn. And he had the Grant chin, that stubborn set of the jaw. "What's his name?" the nurse asked, marking the clipboard. Maya looked down at the tiny, fragile thing that was now her entire universe. "Lucas," she said softly. "Lucas Harrison Linley." She gave him the middle name, not out of love for the father, but as a reminder of what they had survived, a reminder of the legacy he had been denied. Back in New York, on the same day Lucas was born, the society pages ran a headline: Harrison Grant and Serena Thorpe to wed in lavish Hamptons ceremony. Maya read the headline on her phone while nursing Lucas. She felt a dull ache, like an old fracture in a bone, but she didn't cry. She deleted the browser history, put the phone down, and kissed her son's forehead. "It's just us, Lucas," she whispered, "and that's going to be enough." 4 years later, Harrison Grant stood on the balcony of his penthouse overlooking the Hudson River. The view cost $12 million, but it offered him zero peace. His marriage to Serena was functional. That was the polite word. It was a business arrangement with rings. They slept in separate bedrooms. Serena spent most of her time in Paris or Milan, spending the Grant fortune with impressive efficiency. But the real rot was in the silence of the house. There was no heir. It was the one thing the board of directors, his mother, and the trust required. Harrison needed a son to secure the lineage and unlock the final tier of his grandfather's trust fund, which controlled the majority voting shares of the company. Without a child, his cousin, a reckless gambler named Julian, was next in line. Serena had been trying, or so she said. But 4 years had passed. Doctors had been consulted. Arguments had been had. Harrison was starting to suspect Serena didn't want children at all, or perhaps she just didn't want his children. He took a sip of whiskey. He drank more these days than he used to, and looked at the file on his desk. Project The Hudson Green. It was a massive new eco-friendly development in Chicago, a sprawling urban park and residential complex. It was his pet project, the only thing that excited him. His team had shortlisted 3 landscape architecture firms to handle the complex internal gardens. He flipped open the portfolio of the leading candidate, Verdant Visions. The designs were breathtaking, organic, wild, yet structured. They reminded him of her. He pushed the thought away. He had looked for Maya for 6 months after she left. He hired a private investigator, but she had covered her tracks well. No social media, no credit card trails under her old name. It was as if she had evaporated. Eventually, his mother had convinced him that Maya had likely found someone else, someone her own speed. Harrison looked at the lead architect's name on the Chicago proposal. M. Linley. His heart hammered against his ribs. Emsa Linley. It couldn't be. Linley was a common name, right? Get the jet ready, Harrison barked into his phone, dialing his assistant. We're going to Chicago tomorrow. I want to inspect the bidders personally. Chicago, the Hudson Green construction site. Maya fastened her hard hat. She was the owner and lead architect of Verdant Visions now. She had worked herself to the bone for 4 years, building the company from nothing while raising a high-energy toddler. Mommy, look, diggers. Lucas, now a rambunctious 4-year-old with a mop of dark curls and those piercing blue eyes, was pointing at the excavators. Stay behind the yellow line, Lucas, Maya said, grabbing his hand. You promise to be good while Mommy does the walkthrough. Then we get ice cream. Mint chip, Lucas negotiated. Mint chip, she agreed. It was a Saturday, so the site was mostly quiet, but the client was flying in for a surprise inspection. Maya had to bring Lucas. Her babysitter had cancelled last minute with the flu. She saw the black SUVs pull up to the gravel entrance. 3 men in suits stepped out. Maya's breath hitched. Even from 50 yards away, she knew the walk. The broad shoulders, the way he checked his watch. Harrison. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in her chest. She looked at Lucas. He was the spitting image of his father. If Harrison saw him, Lucas, honey, Maya said, her voice trembling, go sit in the truck. Here, take my iPad. Watch your show. Do not come out until I open the door. Do you understand? Okay, Mommy, Lucas chirped, happy to get screen time. Maya buckled him into her pickup truck, parked near the site trailer, and took a deep breath. She smoothed her blazer. She was a CEO now. She wasn't the girl in the thrift store dress anymore. She could do this. She walked out to meet them. Harrison was talking to the site manager, pointing at the blueprints. When he heard footsteps, he turned. The wind off Lake Michigan whipped Maya's hair around her face. Harrison stopped mid-sentence. The color drained from his face, mirroring that night at the Pierre Hotel 4 years ago. Maya? He breathed. The other men fell silent. Mr. Grant, Maya said, her voice icy and professional. She extended a hand. I'm the lead architect on this proposal. I assume you're here to review the specs. Harrison stared at her hand, then up at her eyes. He didn't take it. He looked like he had seen a ghost. You're Ems Linley? I am. If that's a problem, my team can handle the walkthrough, she said, pulling her hand back. No. Harrison stepped closer, ignoring the people around them. Maya, I looked for you. For months. You vanished. I moved on, Harrison, something you did quite publicly before I ever left. She kept her voice flat, but her heart was racing. She needed to get this over with and get him away from the truck. Maya, about that night, I was an idiot. I was pressured. I've regretted it every single day. Save it for the shareholders, she snapped. Do you want to see the plans or not? Harrison looked hurt, but he nodded. Show me. They walked the site for 20 minutes. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Harrison barely looked at the terrain. He couldn't take his eyes off her. He noticed the lack of a ring on her finger. As they looped back toward the entrance, disaster struck. The door of Maya's pickup truck swung open. Mommy, a small voice yelled, the iPad died. Maya froze. Lucas hopped out of the truck, clutching the dead tablet. He ran toward her, his little boots crunching on the gravel. Harrison turned. He saw the boy. He saw the dark curls. He saw the face that was a mirror image of his own baby pictures. Lucas ran up and hugged Maya's leg, then looked up at the tall stranger in the expensive suit. Harrison felt the world tilt on its axis. He looked at the boy's eyes. His eyes. The Grant blue. He looked at Maya. She had gone pale, her hand resting protectively on the boy's shoulder, the same way she had held her stomach that night at the gala. The math hit him like a freight train. 4 years. Maya, Harrison whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of horror and wonder. Who is this? Maya pulled Lucas closer, her chin lifting in defiance. This is my son, Harrison. His name is Lucas. He's… Harrison pointed a shaking finger. He looks exactly like me. Coincidence, Maya lied, though she knew it was futile. How old is he? Harrison demanded, stepping forward. Harrison, don't, she warned, stepping back. How old is he, Maya? He's 4, she said. Harrison stared at the boy. The timeline was perfect. The resemblance was undeniable. He's mine, Harrison said. It wasn't a question, it was a realization that shattered his reality. You hid him from me. You hid my son. You denied his existence before he was even born, Maya shouted, her professional mask finally cracking. You stood in front of your friends and called me a placeholder. You think I was going to hand him over to you, to be raised by a man who was ashamed of his mother? The site went silent. The investors looked at their shoes. Harrison looked at Lucas, who was now looking scared. Harrison dropped to his knees, ignoring the mud ruining his suit pants, to be at eye level with the boy. Lucas, he said softly. Lucas hid his face in Maya's coat. Harrison looked up at Maya, tears in his eyes. You have no idea what you've done. My mother, the trust. They think the line ends with me. The line does end with you, Harrison, Maya said coldly. Lucas is a Linley. He has nothing to do with the Grants. He has my blood. Harrison stood up, anger mixing with the shock. He is the heir to $1 billion legacy. You can't just hide him in Chicago. Watch me, Maya hissed. Get off my sight, Harrison, or I call the police. Harrison stared at her, his chest heaving. He looked at his son one last time, a son he didn't know existed 10 minutes ago. This isn't over, Harrison said, his voice low and dangerous. I'm not that weak boy at the party anymore, Maya. I will be a father to him, whether you like it or not. He turned and stormed toward his SUV, pulling his phone out. Get me my lawyers, he barked into the phone as the door slammed shut. Get me the best family law team in the country, now. Maya watched the cars speed away. She picked up Lucas, who was starting to cry. It's okay, baby, she soothed him, though her own hands were shaking uncontrollably. Mommy's got you. But she knew the truth. The peaceful life they had built was gone. The war had just begun. The silence in Maya's small bungalow that evening was heavy, broken only by the sound of Lucas playing with his toy trucks on the living room rug. He was happily oblivious, making engine noises, unaware that his existence had just launched a corporate and emotional war. Maya sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea. She hadn't stopped shaking since Harrison's SUV disappeared down the road. She had known this day might come, had rehearsed it in her nightmares, but the reality was far more terrifying. Harrison wasn't just an ex-boyfriend anymore, he was the CEO of Grant Enterprises. He had resources she couldn't fathom. He could bury her in legal fees, drag her reputation through the mud, and, the thought that made her bile rise, take Lucas away. Her phone buzzed. It was her cousin Sarah. Maya, there's a man outside your house in a sedan. He's been there for an hour. Do you want me to call the cops? Maya peeked through the blinds. A black town car was parked across the street. They were watching her. No, Sarah, it's okay. I know who sent him. An hour later, there was a knock at the door. A process server handed her a thick manila envelope. Maya's hands trembled as she ripped it open. It was an emergency petition for paternity testing and an interim custody order demanding immediate visitation rights for Harrison Grant. The language was aggressive, clinical, and terrifying. It painted her as a kidnapper who had maliciously deprived a father of his child. She needed a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but someone who wouldn't be intimidated by the Grant name. She called the only person she could think of, Elias Thorne, a scrappy, cynical family law attorney she had met at a community fundraiser a year ago. Elias, it's Maya Linley. I need help. Big help. What kind of trouble are you in, Maya? Elias sounded tired, like he was already 3 scotches deep into his evening. The father of my son just found us. It's Harrison Grant. The line went dead silent for 5 seconds. The real estate Grant? The billionaire? Yes. Maya, Elias breathed, suddenly very sober. Lock your doors. Don't talk to anyone. I'll be there in 20 minutes. You just kicked a hornet's nest the size of Manhattan. Meanwhile, 30,000 feet in the air on his private jet, Harrison was staring at a photo he'd managed to snap of Lucas on the construction site before the chaos. The boy's eyes, his chin. He felt a chaotic mix of rage and profound, aching sadness. He had a son, a 4-year-old son who didn't know him, who was afraid of him. He thought back to that night at the Pierre, the way he had dismissed Maya to impress people who meant nothing to him. I did this, he thought, the realization tasting like ash. I created this mess. He looked across the cabin at his lead counsel, a shark named Beatrice Croft. I want full custody, Beatrice. Maya isn't fit. She hid him. That's parental alienation. Beatrice nodded, tapping on her tablet. We have a strong case for alienation, Harrison, but judges don't like uprooting a child from the primary caregiver, especially one with no record. We need dirt on her. Does she drink? Drugs? Unstable boyfriends? She has nothing, Harrison said, feeling a strange defensive pang. She's a good person. She's just stubborn. Then we make her look unstable, Beatrice said coldly. We paint her as bitter and vindictive. We crush her financially until she begs for a settlement. That's how this works. Harrison looked back at the photo of Lucas. Was that what he wanted? To crush the mother of his child? Just get me my son, he whispered. When Harrison landed at Teterboro, his phone rang. It was his personal line, a number few people had. You found her. It wasn't a question. It was the icy voice of his mother, Catherine Grant. Harrison froze on the tarmac. How did you? I have eyes everywhere, Harrison, especially on your bank accounts. You authorized a massive retainer for Beatrice Croft's firm an hour ago. You only do that when you're cleaning up a disaster. Catherine paused, and the silence was worse than shouting. Tell me, is there an heir? Harrison closed his eyes. Yes, Mother, there's a boy. He's 4. 4. The word hung in the air. You've allowed a Grant heir to live in obscurity for 4 years. You are incompetent, Harrison. I didn't know, Mother. She left. Because you were a fool. Fix it. Get the boy. Bring him to New York. If you don't have him in this city within a month, I will step in. And you know my methods are far less delicate than yours. The call ended. Harrison looked at the New York skyline, the empire his family built. He felt trapped between the woman he had wronged, the son he desperately wanted, and the mother who saw them all as chess pieces. The paternity test was a formality. The results came back 99.999% positive. Harrison returned to Chicago 3 days later, this time not to a construction site, but to a sterile conference room in a downtown law firm for the first mediation session. Maya sat on one side of the mahogany table, wearing her best suit, looking pale but resolute. Elias Thorne sat next to her, looking like a rumpled bulldog ready for a fight. On the other side sat Harrison, flanked by Beatrice Croft and 2 junior associates. And then the door opened and Catherine Grant walked in. She didn't look like a grandmother. She looked like a CEO arriving for a hostile takeover. She wore a Chanel suit that cost more than Maya's car, and her silver hair was coiffed into an immobile helmet. Harrison stood up, surprised. Mother, what are you doing here? Ensuring the future of my family, since you seem incapable, Catherine said, taking a seat at the head of the table, ignoring Maya completely. Mrs. Grant has no standing here, Elias argued, leaning forward. This is between the parents. I am the matriarch of the Grant Trust, which the child stands to inherit, Catherine said smoothly, finally turning her gaze to Maya. It was like being inspected by a cobra. You are Maya. Ms. Linley, Maya corrected, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Look at me, Ms. Linley, Catherine said. You were a junior landscaper. You had a dalliance with my son. You got pregnant. Instead of doing the responsible thing and informing the family, you ran away to play house in the Midwest. You deprived this child of his birthright, his education, his legacy. I deprived him of a father who called his mother a nobody in public, Maya retorted, anger overriding fear. I protected him from a family that treats children like assets. Catherine raised an eyebrow. He is an asset, the most valuable one we have. And you have done a poor job of managing him. He lives in a 2-bedroom bungalow. He attends a public preschool. He is happy. He is loved. Love doesn't pay for Harvard. Love doesn't run a conglomerate, Catherine snapped. She slid a check across the table, face down. Here is the offer, Catherine said. $5 million. A penthouse in New York, title in your name. A monthly stipend of $50,000. In exchange, you move to New York immediately. Harrison gets 50-50 custody. The child, Lucas is it, will be enrolled in St. Bernard's immediately. We control his education and his public exposure. Maya looked at the check. It was enough money to solve every problem she'd ever had. It was also a golden cage. No, Maya said. Harrison looked up. Maya, be reasonable. It's a good offer. He needs to know his family. He is my son, not your heir replacement therapy, Maya said, standing up. We aren't moving to New York to be paraded around. You want to be a father, Harrison? You come here, you put in the work, you earn it. You don't buy it. You are an insolent little girl, Catherine hissed, her composure cracking. We will destroy you in court. We will prove you unfit. We will take him, and you will end up with nothing. Enough, mother, Harrison shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Everyone froze. Harrison had never raised his voice at Catherine in his life. He stood up, his face flushed. She's right. I was the one who messed up. I was the one who drove her away. We are not bullying her into submission. He turned to Maya. His eyes were pleading. Maya, I won't let them take him away from you. But please, don't keep him from me. Let me meet him. Properly. On your terms. Please. The raw desperation in his voice surprised her. The arrogant prince from the Pierre was gone. Elias nudged Maya. It's a start, Maya. If we go to court, a judge will order visitation anyway. Better to control it now. Maya took a deep breath, thinking of Lucas. Thinking of how he asked where his daddy was when he saw other kids with theirs at the park. 1 hour, Maya said, her voice tight. Tomorrow, at the park near our house, supervised by me. If he gets scared, it ends immediately. Harrison nodded eagerly, like a man thrown a life preserver. Thank you, Maya. Catherine stood up, smoothing her skirt, looking disgustedly at her son. Sentimentality is a weakness, Harrison. You've just handed her the leverage. Don't come crying to me when she uses it. She walked out. Harrison sank back into his chair, looking exhausted. He had defended Maya against his mother. It was a small step, but it was the first real thing he'd done in 4 years. When Harrison returned to the grand silent penthouse in Tribeca 2 days later, the atmosphere was toxic. He had met Lucas. It had been excruciating and wonderful. Lucas had cried at first, hiding behind Maya's legs. Harrison had just sat on the grass, showing him the toy excavator he'd brought, waiting. Eventually, Lucas's curiosity won out. They had played in the sand for 20 minutes. When Harrison left, Lucas gave him a hesitant wave. It was the best moment of Harrison's life, and now he was back in the mausoleum he shared with Serena. Serena was waiting for him in the living room, nursing a martini. She looked immaculate and furious. It's all over the tabloids, Harrison, she spat, throwing a newspaper onto the coffee table. The headline read, Grant Heir discovered in Chicago, the billion-dollar secret child. Someone leaked it, Harrison said wearily, loosening his tie. He suspected his mother, trying to force his hand. How dare you? Serena stood up, her voice trembling with genuine rage. You humiliated me. 4 years I have played the role of the dutiful wife. I have hosted your parties, charmed your investors, tolerated your mother, and all this time you had a bastard child with the gardener. I didn't know, Serena. You have to believe me. It doesn't matter if you knew. He exists. Which means my position is compromised. The terms of our prenuptial agreement state that if we divorce without an heir, my settlement is halved. You think I don't know the trust bylaws? Harrison looked at her, really looked at her. There was no hurt in her eyes, only calculation. Is that all you care about? The settlement? I cared about our arrangement, Harrison. We had a deal. We were supposed to be the power couple. Now I look like the barren wife holding the bag while you play daddy to some Midwestern mistake. Don't call him that, Harrison warned, his voice low. I'll call him whatever I want. I'm the victim here. Harrison shook his head. He needed a drink. He walked to the wet bar. As he reached for a glass, his hand brushed against Serena's large Hermes tote bag sitting on the counter. It tipped over, spilling its contents. Lipstick, keys, wallet, and a small unmarked orange pill bottle rolled onto the marble counter. Harrison instinctively picked up the bottle. It wasn't aspirin. They were tiny, round pills. He recognized them from an ex-girlfriend years ago. Birth control. He stared at the bottle, then at Serena. The air left the room. You're on the pill, he whispered. Serena's face went white. She snatched the bottle from his hand. Give me that. For 4 years, Harrison said, his voice rising in disbelief. We have been going to fertility specialists. You had me taking vitamins. You cried when your period came every month. You blamed my stress levels. Harrison, it's not. You've been lying to me every single day of our marriage, he shouted, the betrayal cutting deeper than anything he could imagine. He realized then the depth of his own blindness. He had treated Maya like dirt for being real, while marrying a woman who was nothing but smoke and mirrors. Why, Serena? Why marry me if you didn't want the life? Serena laughed, a brittle, harsh sound. I wanted the life, Harrison. I just didn't want the burden. Children are messy. They ruin your body, they ruin your social schedule. I figured I'd wait until your grandfather passed, we'd secure the majority share, and then, maybe. Or maybe I'd just keep pretending until you got tired of trying. She looked at him with pure disdain. I wasn't about to ruin my figure to give birth to a child for a man who doesn't even love me. Harrison looked around the opulent apartment. It felt like a prison cell he had built for himself. Get out, Harrison said. Excuse me? Get out of my house. Take your clothes. Take your jewelry. I want you gone tonight. You can't throw me out. I am your wife. Not for long. I'm filing for divorce in the morning. And based on this, he pointed to the pill bottle, I think I have grounds to challenge the prenup based on fraud. Serena glared at him, her mask of perfection shattering. You will regret this, Harrison. You think your little gardener and her bastard are going to save you. Your mother will eat them alive, and I'll help her hold the fork. She stormed off to the bedroom to pack. Harrison stood alone in the living room. The silence was profound. His marriage was over. His mother was on the warpath. He was in love with a woman who hated him, and he had a son who barely knew him. He pulled out his phone and opened the photo gallery. He looked at the picture of Lucas in the sandbox, waving. He had burned his life to the ground in one night. Now he had to figure out if anything in the ashes was worth saving. He dialed his pilot. Ready the jet, he said. We're going back to Chicago. Chicago, 3 days later. The siege began not with a shout, but with the terrifying synchronized click of 100 camera shutters. Maya woke to a chaotic strobe light effect dancing across her bedroom ceiling. It was barely dawn, the sky a bruised purple over the Chicago skyline, but her front lawn was lit up like a football stadium. She crawled to the window, peering through the slat of the blinds, and felt her blood turn to ice. They were everywhere, vans with satellite dishes, reporters in heavy coats clutching microphones like weapons, and a swarm of freelance paparazzi trampling her winter hydrangeas. The headline Serena had threatened had gone nuclear overnight. It was plastered on every tabloid, trending on every social media platform. The secret Grant Heir, Mom is a broke landscaper. The narrative was vicious. The articles didn't paint her as a struggling mother. They painted her as a schemer who had trapped a billionaire, a woman who had hidden a child to secure a massive payout. They called Lucas a golden ticket. Mommy? Maya spun around. Lucas was standing in the doorway, clutching his frayed blanket, his eyes wide with fear. Why are there people screaming outside? It's just a parade, baby, Maya lied, her voice trembling. She scooped him up, her heart hammering against his small chest. We're going to play a game today. It's called Fortress. We close all the blinds, we build a tent in the living room, and we don't open the door for anyone. Not even the pizza man. Okay, Lucas whispered, burying his face in her neck. Maya carried him downstairs, her mind racing. She needed to call Elias. She needed a restraining order. But when she picked up her phone, she saw a string of notifications that made her knees buckle. Alert! Your business credit line ending in 8842 has been frozen due to suspicious activity. Alert! The contract for the Hudson Green project has been terminated effective immediately due to reputational risk clauses. Voicemail. Maya, this is the bank. We're calling in your small business loan. We need the full balance by Friday. Maya dropped the phone on the couch. It wasn't just a media storm, it was an execution. Catherine Grant wasn't just trying to humiliate her, she was systematically destroying Maya's ability to provide for her son. If Maya had no income, no credit, and no home, Catherine could walk into a courtroom and argue that Lucas was in an unstable environment. She was being hunted. A heavy, authoritative pounding on the front door made her jump. Lucas let out a small whimper from inside his blanket fort. "Go away!" Maya screamed at the door, grabbing a heavy ceramic vase from the mantel. "I'm calling the police." "Maya, it's me. It's Harrison." The voice was muffled but unmistakable. It wasn't the smooth, baritone drawl of the CEO she knew. It sounded wrecked, hoarse. Maya hesitated. She looked at the vase, then at the terrified shape of her son under the blankets. She marched to the door, unlocked the deadbolt, and opened it just enough to see out. Harrison stood on the porch. He looked like he had been through a war. His designer suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a wrinkled grey t-shirt. He hadn't shaved in days, a dark shadow covering his jaw. His eyes were red-rimmed and wild. Behind him, the paparazzi surged forward, sensing blood, shouting questions. "Is it true, Mr. Grant? Did you know about the boy? Are you stepping down?" Harrison didn't even look at them. He pushed through the gap in the door, and Maya slammed it shut, locking it instantly. The noise of the outside world muffled slightly, but the tension inside the hallway skyrocketed. "What are you doing here?" Maya hissed, backing away, the vase still in her hand. "Look at what you brought to my door. My son is hiding under a table because of your family. Your mother just froze my accounts, Harrison. She cancelled my contracts. She's starving us out." "I know," Harrison said. He didn't move toward her. He stood by the door, breathing hard, as if he had run all the way from the airport. "I know exactly what she's doing. It's the standard Grant playbook. Isolate, bankrupt, acquire." "Get out," Maya said, her voice shaking with rage. "Go back to your penthouse. Go back to your wife. We don't want your money, and we don't want your help." "I don't have a penthouse anymore," Harrison said quietly. "And I don't have a wife." Maya froze. "What?" Harrison reached into the back pocket of his jeans and pulled out a folded, crumpled document. He held it out to her. "I filed for divorce this morning. Serena is gone. She took the apartment, the art, and the Hamptons house. I let her have it all." Maya didn't take the paper. She just stared at him. "That doesn't fix this, Harrison. Your mother still controls the trust. She still controls the lawyers." "Read the second page," Harrison urged. Maya snatched the paper. It wasn't just a divorce filing, it was a copy of a letter addressed to the Board of Directors of Grant Enterprises. To the board, effective immediately, I, Harrison Grant, resign as Chief Executive Officer. Furthermore, I am initiating the liquidation of my entire 15% personal equity stake in the company. I have instructed my brokers to sell my shares on the open market at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Maya looked up, her mouth falling open. You resigned." "I didn't just resign," Harrison said, his voice gaining strength. "I'm threatening to crash the stock. If I dump 15% of the company all at once, the share price will tank. It will wipe out billions in value. It will destroy the company's credit rating. It will ruin my mother." "Why?" Maya whispered, the ceramic vase slipping from her fingers and landing with a dull thud on the carpet. "That company is your life. It's your identity." "It was my prison," Harrison said, taking a step closer. The raw honesty in his eyes was disarming. "I was poor when I had all that money, Maya. I was miserable. I looked at Serena and saw a stranger. I looked in the mirror and saw a coward who let the only woman he ever loved walk out of a ballroom because he was afraid of what his friends would think." He stopped, his hands hanging open at his sides, defenseless. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to take me back. But I am going to stay here, in this hallway, until those vultures leave." I am Lucas's father. And for the first time in my life, I am choosing him over the legacy." Before Maya could respond, a siren wailed outside. Not a police siren, it was the deep, resonant honk of a limousine horn cutting through the chatter of the press. Then a bullhorn amplified a voice that made Maya's stomach turn. "This is the Department of Child and Family Services. Open the door." Maya gasped. "CPS." She called CPS. Harrison's face darkened. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a terrifying, cold calm. He looked out the peephole. "It's her," he said. "She's here." "She's going to take him," Maya sobbed, panic finally breaking her composure. "She has the judges in her pocket. She'll say I'm unfit because of the paparazzi, because of the debt." "No," Harrison said. He turned to her, gripping her shoulders. His hands were warm and steady. "Stay here with Lucas. Do not open this door unless I tell you to." "Harrison, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to end it." Harrison unlocked the door and stepped out onto the porch. The scene was surreal. The paparazzi parted like the Red Sea to make way for a woman in a pristine white wool coat, standing next to a black limousine. Catherine Grant looked like a queen surveying a conquered village. Beside her stood two uncomfortable-looking social workers and a lawyer holding a clipboard. Harrison closed the door behind him and walked down the steps. The flashbulbs erupted, a blinding wall of white light. "Step aside, Harrison," Catherine called out, her voice crisp and projected for the cameras. "This has gone on long enough. This woman is creating a dangerous, unstable environment for the child. We have an emergency court order for temporary custody." She gestured to the social workers. "Go get the boy." Harrison stopped on the bottom step, blocking the path. He didn't shout. He didn't scream. He just stood there, an immovable object. "If anyone takes another step toward this house," Harrison said, his voice low but carrying perfectly in the sudden silence, "I will burn Grant Enterprises to the ground before lunch." Catherine laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "Don't be dramatic, Harrison. You're emotional. You'll thank me later when this is cleaned up and you're back in the boardroom." "I'm not going back to the boardroom, Mother. I resigned." "You're bluffing. You'd never walk away from the power. It's in your blood." Harrison pulled out his phone. He held it up. "I have Arthur Miller from the Wall Street Journal on speed dial. He's standing right there." Harrison pointed to a reporter near the curb. "If you don't turn around and get in that car in 60 seconds, I'm giving him the exclusive." "Exclusive on what?" Catherine sneered. "That you're having a midlife crisis?" "No," Harrison said. "An exclusive on the zoning bribes for the Hudson Yards project. The offshore accounts in the Caymans where you've been hiding the family trust's taxable assets for 20 years. And the falsified environmental reports for the chemical plant in Jersey." The color drained from Catherine's face so fast it looked like she had been struck. The silence that fell over the lawn was absolute. The reporters, realizing something monumental was happening, leaned in. "You wouldn't," Catherine whispered, her poise cracking. "You signed those reports too. You'd go to prison." "I don't care," Harrison said. "I'll go to prison, I'll go broke. I'll spend the rest of my life flipping burgers if I have to, but I will not let you touch my son. Do you understand me?" He took a step toward her. "You have no leverage anymore, Mother, because I don't want what you have to give. You have lost." Catherine looked at him. She looked for the fear she had instilled in him since he was a boy, the desire for approval, the need for the Grant name. She found none of it. She saw only a man who was willing to destroy himself to protect his family. She looked at the reporters, their phones recording every second. If he spoke, the stock wouldn't just tank. The DOJ would be at her door by evening. She made the only calculation that mattered to a Grant: self-preservation. "Get in the car," she snapped to the lawyer. "But Mrs. Grant, the order—" The social worker stammered. "I said get in the car," Catherine screamed, her voice cracking, the veneer of control shattering completely. She turned and scrambled into the back seat of the limo, hiding her face from the cameras. The door slammed shut. The social workers, realizing their political cover had just evaporated, retreated to their sedan. The limo peeled away from the curb, tires screeching. Harrison stood alone on the lawn. The paparazzi were shouting at him now, sensing the shift. "Mr. Grant, did you really bribe the zoning commission? Mr. Grant, are you reconciling with Ms. Linley?" Harrison ignored them. He turned his back on the cameras, on the fame, on the legacy. He walked back up the steps of the small bungalow. Maya was standing in the open doorway. She had Lucas in her arms. She had heard every word. Harrison stopped at the threshold. He looked older than his 36 years. He looked stripped bare. "They're gone," he said, his voice cracking slightly. Maya looked at him. She saw the man who had just nuked his own life to save hers. She saw the sacrifice. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture. It was a desperate, bloody act of survival. "You really did it," she whispered. "You really burned it all down." "It was just money," Harrison said, a small, tired smile touching his lips. "It wasn't real. This is real." Lucas squirmed in Maya's arms, peering at the man in the dirty t-shirt. "Is the bad lady gone?" Harrison looked at his son, and the tears he had been holding back finally spilled over, tracking through the dust on his cheeks. "Yeah, buddy, she's gone. She's never coming back." Maya shifted Lucas to her hip and reached out with her free hand. She grabbed Harrison's hand, the hand that used to sign billion-dollar checks, now empty and trembling. "Come inside," she said softly. "We're having spaghetti. You can help chop the onions." Harrison let out a breath that felt like it had been held for 4 years. He stepped across the threshold, and Maya closed the door, shutting out the world. 2 years later, the sun was setting over the trellis, casting long golden shadows across the vegetable patch. It wasn't a perfectly manicured English garden like the ones at the Grant estate. It was wild, vibrant, and messy. Tomato vines tangled with sunflowers, pumpkin patches spilled over the walkways. It was alive. Maya stood on the back porch of the farmhouse they had bought 40 minutes outside of Chicago. It was a fixer-upper, peeling paint and creaky floorboards, but it was theirs. Paid for with the profits from Verdant Visions, which was now the most sought-after boutique landscape firm in the Midwest. Harrison walked up the steps behind her. He was wearing work boots and a flannel shirt covered in sawdust. He had started a small carpentry business, making custom furniture. He made in a year what he used to spend on a single vacation, and he had never been happier. "Lucas is stuck in the apple tree again," Harrison said, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Well, go get him down before he breaks a branch," Maya laughed, leaning back against him. "I tried. He says he's a sniper. He's guarding the perimeter from invaders." Maya smiled, but her eyes grew distant for a moment. The scars of the past were still there. They always would be. Catherine Grant had died alone in her penthouse 6 months ago, surrounded by nurses who were paid to be there. She had left the entire Grant fortune to a charitable trust, a final petty act to ensure Harrison got nothing. Harrison didn't care. He didn't even go to the funeral. He had been too busy building a treehouse for Lucas. Serena had remarried a minor duke in Europe within 6 months of the divorce. Last Maya heard, she was miserable in a drafty castle in Austria. Harrison wrapped his arms around Maya's waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. He smelled of pine wood and rain. "You know," he murmured, looking out at the fireflies starting to blink in the twilight. "I was thinking." "Dangerous," she teased, covering his hands with hers. "I was thinking about that night at the Pierre. When I told Toby you were just a placeholder." Maya stiffened slightly. It was the wound that had started it all. "I was wrong," he whispered into her hair, his voice thick with emotion. "I was the placeholder. I was just holding space in the world until I could become the man who deserved you." Maya turned around in his arms. She looked up at his face, the same blue eyes her son had, but softer now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by lines of laughter and hard work. "You're not a placeholder anymore, Harrison," she said softly, reaching up to brush a wood shaving from his collar. "You're home." From the apple tree at the bottom of the yard, a small, joyous voice shouted out, "Daddy, Mommy, look, I can see the moon." Harrison kissed Maya, a slow, deep kiss that tasted of second chances and quiet victories. "Coming, Lucas," he yelled back. He took Maya's hand, and together they ran into the yard, their feet sinking into the soft earth, chasing their son under the rising moon, leaving the ghosts of the Empire far behind them in the dark. And that is the story of Harrison and Maya. It took losing $1 billion empire for Harrison to realize that the only wealth that matters is the people waiting for you at dinner. He learned the hard way that you can't buy a legacy. You have to build it with love, sacrifice, and truth. What do you think? Did Harrison deserve a second chance? Or should Maya have never let him back in? It's a tough one. I want to know your opinion. Would you forgive the man who denied you in public? Let me know in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. We have a crazy drama coming up next week about a CEO who faked his own death. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching.